with Crystal. Grab a cup of coffee and join me in one of my special editions called Classics with Crystal. Classics with Crystal is a little different than Coffee with Crystal, which is primarily for writers who are wanting to perfect their craft and work their business. Classics with Crystal can also be for writers because as writers, we need to look to the best of the best to work our craft. But this is also a segment for readers, and this can be readers of any kind. You could be a junior high student, a high school student, college student, or you could be an adult after school wanting to reread some of the classics. It could be for someone who's read the book and wants to learn more about it, somebody who read it and didn't really understand it very well, or it could be even for those of you who would love to reread it with a different lens. As you can see, my copy is completely torn apart. I have read it so many times. Some of my first times reading it were in high school. Then I was also an 8th grade language arts teacher. And so I actually didn't teach it when I taught 8th grade, but I taught To Kill a Mockingbird during my student teaching when I was in a 9th grade classroom. And then I had an absolute blast teaching this because there are so many different lessons you can learn from this book, which I will get into. So if you have never read To Kill a Mockingbird before, here's my very, very worn cover. Obviously, if you bought it for new, it would look much better than this. But it's written by Harper Lee, and it was published in 1960, right before the peak of the civil rights movement, which is really important to keep in mind when you see that this is such a timeless book. It was a book before its time. Harper Lee decided to write about issues like racism before they were really prevalent in the media, which is so awesome that she had the guts to write about a topic that really did need to be discussed and it needed to be fixed. Overall, To Kill a Mockingbird is a coming-of-age novel by the perspective of Scout. Jean Louise Finch is her real name, but Scout is her nickname. And she grows up in Macomb, Alabama, which is a really small town. And at the beginning of the novel, Scout believes that the world is full of fascinating people. Her days are spent playing make-believe with her older brother Jim and her good friend Dill, who comes into town every summer. And her world is safe. But as the novel progresses and the seasons change, so does her little girl view of humanity. And that's really what the whole book is about, is all of these different plot points changing her, making her realize that the world is not as safe as she once thought it was. And it's unfair. It's not fair like she always thought it would be. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And I'm really going to stress why I love this book. And I hope that this gives you some things to reconsider or remind you of if you've read it before. One of the first things that I really, really love about this book is it's so relatable. Because Harper Lee chose to have it from a 6-year-old learning about the world, we can all relate to that. I'm pretty sure a 6-year-old is not reading this book. So we can all look back at those early moments in our lives and remember what it was like to view the world that way and see it changing. I mean, I can even remember when I was in early elementary school, going to friends' houses for the first time and spending the night and kind of having this awakening, thinking, oh, they eat different things for dinner than we do. They have a different bedtime routine than I do at home. Or their mom or dad say different things to one another. They have a completely different relationship than my parents do. And I remember thinking, oh, I didn't realize it was this way. You know, I kind of knew people were different, but I had never experienced people being different until I would stay at their houses. And that's really what Scout goes through, is she starts seeing all these different people in her small town go through several different issues and problems in their lives, and she starts seeing the world a little bit differently than she used to. And I love being able to relate to her in that aspect. All right, second reason I really like this book is the characters. Really, the characters are the ultimate best part about this book, and I could go on and on and on about every single character in this book. But for the sake of time, I'll just discuss some of the characters in this book. First one and one of my favorites is Boo Radley. I love that Boo Radley is a mystery. He lives next to Jim and Scout, and he stays inside his house. He never comes out. And so he builds this level of suspense throughout the book because Jim and Scout and Dill, when he's home over the summer, really want to know who is Boo Radley. They're left to assume that he's this bad guy, that he is this mystery man who must have done terrible things and he's just stuck inside his house. But as readers, we start seeing different sides of him, and we get these little bits of foreshadowing throughout the book that he might in fact be a nice guy. Some of those points where it foreshadows who Boo Radley might be is when he leaves presents for Jim and Scout in the tree. So they're walking home from school and they'll see little presents. One of them is gum, for instance. So that's one example. Boo Radley also fixes Jim's pants. There's one night where Jim, he decides to go touch the door of Boo Radley's house, and as he's running back home, his pants get caught on the fence, and he just runs straight home. He's completely freaked out, and he goes home without any pants on, and later finds them folded nice and neat for him and they're fixed. And we can assume at that point that Boo Radley is the one who fixed them. There's also an instance where Miss Maudie's house catches on fire, and of course, as a small town, everyone comes rushing out of their house to watch this fire, and Scout and Jim are standing there. Scout's freezing in the cold, watching this fire and watch Miss Maudie's house burn down, and all of a sudden she realizes she's not cold anymore and realizes there's a blanket over her. And so we later find out that Boo Radley, is probably the one who put that blanket around her to keep her warm. So those little small instances that are so fun because Boo Radley is unexpected. You don't know him, and you really only see him at the very end. So he's a great character to have in the book, building that suspense, wondering, what will he do next? Will we ever get to meet him? And of course, if you've read the book, you know that you finally get to meet him at the end. And at the end is definitely the best part for Boo Radley, because Boo Radley saves Jim and Scout's lives. You have Tom Robinson's trial is over, and Bob Ewell wants to get back at Atticus. He is really angry with Atticus for the role that he played for trying to help Tom Robinson. And so he wants to get back at Atticus by killing his children. And Boo Radley steps up and kills Bob Ewell. He saves Jim and Scout's lives. And so it's really neat to wonder who he is this whole time and then have him be the hero at the end who saves them. How awesome is that? Like I just mentioned earlier, we also have Tom Robinson. So Tom Robinson is an African-American man who was falsely accused of raping Mayula Ewell. And he plays a really important part in Scout's transformation from this girl who believes the world is fair and kind to realizing it's not. Because Atticus, her dad, decides that he, as a lawyer, he will be the one to represent Tom Robinson. And so he wants to do it because he knows that Tom Robinson is being falsely accused, and he wants to try to get him free. And through that trial, Scout and Jim and Dill, they sneak out to watch Tom Robinson's trial, and they see how angry people are, and they see that these people that they thought were good and kind from their town, that they're angry and that they want Tom Robinson in jail. And that's really the biggest wake-up call for Scout, to think, how can this be? You have this poor man who was just trying to be nice. He was trying to help Mayula. He felt sorry for her. And then he ends up getting falsely accused. And it's this horrible situation for him and for his family, because Tom Robinson is married. He has children. He was this kind guy who was trying to help a neighbor out. And at the end, it's just so hard for Scout to realize, how could people be so cruel and just want to put him in jail just because he's an African-American man. So he plays a really pivotal role in the book. You also have Atticus. And I must say, rereading this book as a parent really gave me a newfound respect for Atticus. I always thought he was, he's a good guy, cool dad, whatever, helping Tom out. But rereading as a parent, I just gained so much respect for him. He has so many good quotes, so many good points to give, pointers to give Scout and Jim as they're growing up, and to know that he decided to represent Tom, even though he knew he wouldn't win. He knew that this was a time in the world where there was no way that Tom Robinson would be free. But he did it anyway because he knew that he was the type of dad who couldn't go home and raise Scout and Jim knowing that he didn't try, because he knew Tom at least deserved someone to be in his corner. Tom deserved somebody to be there for him and stand up for him. And Atticus knew, even though he was being ridiculed by the whole town, Scout and Jim were being ridiculed at school, and even his family. You know, Atticus's sister ends up coming into the picture and staying with them when things are starting to get really bad and people are starting to become violent against Atticus. And she doesn't get it. No one really seems to get why Atticus would want to represent Tom Robinson. But thankfully, Atticus has raised Scout and Jim in the way that he has for them to see that he's doing the right thing, that their dad was doing the right thing. And, you know, even the transformation of Scout viewing her dad changes throughout the book, because at the beginning she kind of views him as this old, boring guy. He's much older than a lot of the other dads. But as the book progresses and she sees these different instances where her dad stands up for people and he's there for their neighbors, she starts realizing that her dad is something special. And I love that. I mean, how many, once again, thinking of relatable, you know, have you ever had those times as a teenager when you think, oh my gosh, I can't believe my mom did that. Oh, did my dad really just say that? But as you get older, you know, you start respecting your parents and in a different way than you used to. I mean, like I said, even as a parent, there were so many things that I, you know, as a kid, you don't really think about. And now I go, oh my gosh, that must have been so hard for my mom to stay at home with us. Now I get it, because I work from home. I'm with my kids. I love all three of them. But there are days where I want to rip my hair out. And I'm like, what is happening right now? And I go, I could see, I understand my mom a little bit better now after everything that she's done for us when she was a stay-at-home mom too. So little things like that, I love that we get to see that through Scout's perspective. You also have some awesome flat minor characters. Because it's a small town, you get to see these other minor characters highlighted in unique ways that actually play roles in changing Scout's viewpoints. You have Miss Maudie's interesting because she's nice. She's there for Jim and Scout, but at the same time, like, you can tell there, especially when Tom Robinson's case comes out, she does her views against racism are similar to Atticus's, but she won't say anything to anybody. She kind of plays that role of, well, I don't agree with racism, but I don't want to say anything because I don't want people to come against me. So I like that character's in the book, because there are people like that who might disagree with something, but they're not at the point where they are confident enough to step up and speak up against something. Same thing with Dill. I love Dill. He's a minor character that comes in, and he's so cute. You know, he falls in love with Scout. He tells her he wants to marry her and writes her letters and whatnot. And so he's a really fun character. You also have someone like Hecate, which is the sheriff, or who is the sheriff. He also has my respect in the fact that at the very end, when Boo Radley kills Bob Ewell, he decides that he's not going to tell the town that it was in fact Boo Radley that killed Bob Ewell, because he respects Boo Radley enough to know that Boo Radley would not want to be in the limelight. And so he makes the decision to just say, Bob Ewell fell on his own knife, and that's how he died. Atticus doesn't get it first, and then he comes around and realizes what Hecate was doing, which I think is a really cool decision on his part. One of the last reasons I really love To Kill a Mockingbird is the quotes. There are so many awesome life lessons that I want to teach my kids, and that I think even as adults we need reminders. So I'm going to read these to you. The first one is, you never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb inside his skin and walk around in it. I can't tell you how many times I've thought of that quote when I've been in situations where someone will say or do something, and a lot of times I think our natural inclination is just to judge them. Like, that was so stupid, I can't believe they did that. But then you think of Atticus's quote and you think, you know what, instead of judging them, maybe we should be considering, Why would they have done that? What brought them to the point where they said or they did that? It's such a good reminder. Don't judge. Just consider what it would be like to walk around in their shoes for a day. Why would they have done that? And maybe even getting to the point where you ask that particular person why they said or did that instead of condemning them. Another great quote is, things are never as bad as they seem. I'm going to say that one more time. Things are never as bad as they seem. I can't tell you, so I have toddlers in my house, and how many times they will just flat out get upset. Maybe it's because they want to watch TV and I say no, and it's like fall on the floor, screaming, crying. And as they get older, they start realizing that that is not the appropriate way to act. But I think even as adults, our tantrums are just different, right? We still throw tantrums. It may not be us flailing on the floor, screaming and crying, but we might go sulk in a room, or we might not talk to somebody. How many times did we do that where maybe it's not as bad as it seems? We think that it feels like the end of the world. I remember even when I was student teaching that I wanted to move to Bettendorf to be closer to my husband, who is now my husband. We were just dating at the time. And my student teaching placement fell through, and I wasn't placed in Bettendorf yet. And I was so upset. I remember sobbing and thinking, this is it, like, I don't know how we'll be together. We'll be in completely different places. And it turned around. I got a phone call probably the next day saying that the place where I student taught had an opening, and I ended up having a wonderful experience student teaching there, which then led to a connection to get my first job as an 8th grade language arts teacher. But it seemed like the end of the world at that point, and I look back and I think, wow, really? That's what I was crying over? Because so many worse things could have happened, but at that moment, it felt like the worst thing in the world. So it's always good to remind yourself that no matter what situation you're in, it's not as bad as it seems. The last quote I'll leave you with is, this is when Scout is being ridiculed at school because Atticus is representing Tom Robinson, and so the kids are picking on her, and she fights back. She's a fighter, and she's physically fighting them. So Atticus tells her, you just hold your head high and keep those fists down. No matter what anybody says to you, don't let them get your goat. Try fighting with your head for once. How many times do you want to fight back? And not even physically, but even with harmful words. But when you're fighting with your head, you realize that arguments don't have to be screaming or fist fights. Arguments can be where two adults sit down and have a respectful conversation about their differences. It really can be as simple as that. Atticus, just like the book, is a man before his time. All of these quotes are wonderful, great life experiences that not only do we need to teach our children, but we also need to remind ourselves as adults. That's why I'm so happy I reread this book. I enjoyed every minute of it. There were moments where I would sit and read the book and I'd go, oh my gosh, I remember that. Or as if my husband was sitting nearby, I'd be like, oh, do you remember this part in To Kill a Mockingbird? This is so cool. Or do you remember when Atticus said this or that? I just love this book. I would highly recommend rereading it if you haven't read it in several years. And I would love to know what you think. What were some life lessons you learned from this book? What are some of your favorite quotes? Who are some of your favorite characters or favorite plot points? Please don't forget to comment below. I would love to know those things. Also, don't forget to subscribe. I'll be posting these classics with Crystal once a month, rereading new books, and I'll keep you posted on some of the newer books that are coming, or some of the books that are coming up that I'll be reading if you want to read them along with me as well. I haven't decided which classic I'll read next, but I will keep you posted on that. Thank you so much for joining me today and for having a cup of coffee with me. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Happy writing and reading, since we're talking about reading this time. Happy reading.